call this meeting to order. And the only item on our agenda tonight is discussion of an award for the 2020 auditing contract for the city. And we said we'd do this because we got kind of caught by surprise in September and did a quick one-year renewal of the Scanlon Company. And we said we get started this time of year to like do a procurement process. And in the beginning of that process, we discovered that in general, the state encourages communities to change auditors every 5 to 8 years. Mm-hmm. And this one-year renewal is only year 4. So we could essentially renew with Scanlon for 1 more year and just hit the threshold when the state says they recommend you change. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, really what I figured we'd discuss today is, do we want to go for the 5 and then start the process rather than doing it before the minimum recommended time of doing it? Because I don't really, our audits haven't been the most dramatic thing. They used to be, but they've not been that dramatic of late. You know, they're not finding all kinds of crazy stuff. We've sort of, you know, we have the same administration. We've kind of gotten into a groove with these things. And it is kind of the reality that we're probably always going to get the best price from our current auditor since they're already up to speed with what's going on in the city. And if you change them, that other auditing firm is going to have to spend more time to catch up with the status quo to be able to be more competitive. You know, the second time around, they're really competitive because they already done all the legwork because they've been regularly auditing the city. Mm-hmm. That's not to say we shouldn't entertain changing them at some point, but perhaps at least doing the 5-year recommendation before we think about changing them. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's the opinion?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So what we're looking at is doing a 1 year or going into the 5 years.
No, the state is saying you should change. You should consider changing every 5 to 8 years.
Right. And we have one
We
more
have
year.
Scanlon is on board for 4. This would be the 5th if we renew them for 2020. Because we gave them a 3-year deal, then last year we renewed them for another year.
Yeah.
If we renew them for another year, we're at that minimum 5 to 8. Mm-hmm. We're at the 5 of the 5 to 8. Okay. So conceivably, we could keep them another 3 years and be at 8. But I don't know if we want to do that or not, but it might seem a little weird to get rid of them without even going 5 years. And I think, did not they indicate they would charge $1,000 more for the next?
Yes, I spoke to Tom Scanlon, and he said that if the city did decide to extend his contract another year, it would either be at the same price or it would be $1,000 more if he was going to check and see if there was a new GASB item that was going to be implemented this year, and if so, it would be an additional $1,000. But
yeah, and GASB is the government accounting standards. And every now and then they change those, which means there's a new hoop to jump through and more work.
Right.
But this most recent 1-year extension was the same price as the 3-year deal, I think. So it might go up if something else comes up. The other thing we got to keep in mind is usually the schools awards an audit, but they often award to who we award to, because the same sort of scenario comes up where the auditor that does the schools has to know the city side. So if it's the same person, it costs less for the schools because they already did the city. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to switch around, it's probably going to have an impact on the school department. And at the moment, they're using Scanlon like we're using Scanlon. Mm-hmm. So we may want to have a conversation with them if we're planning to switch around, just so that they know it might cost them more. Yeah.
So maybe a question and a comment. So the first question is, when we explored this in depth, I guess it was now 4 years ago, yeah. Right? And you know, so my question is, at that point, how long had Scanlon been with us? Because yes, we'll be 4 years, but there are then many years behind that as well, right? Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is sort of one of the arguments that we've always used for keeping them is that yes, they have relationships, they know how things work. There's a seamlessness to keeping them, which is also, of course, the best argument for changing it up, because if having someone with fresh eyes who doesn't have that kind of set relationship also has value as well. This is Maureen, actually.
And they've been at least since 2001, because I know when I was at the fire
Yeah, I don't
department in
know how long
2001
they've
through
been-
2008, they were the ones.
They've done Northampton for a long time.
For a long
Yeah.
time.
How long have they been with us, Susan?
I don't know, but I know,
They've been doing it since you've been finance director.
yeah.
As long
That's,
as I've been a counselor.
yeah. No, I came to Northampton in 2004 and they were the auditors then.
Yes.
When I was in the school department, they were doing the city, so
Yeah.
they go back a long way.
I think, where this would be their 5th year comes from is we did the entire procurement process 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And they started with a, contract 4 years ago. So it's not been 5 years since we did the last procurement process.
Right.
But they prevailed then, and they've been around for a long time. And I think price made a difference then, because frankly, the incumbent's always gonna have the best price, because they don't have to do any extra work to get to where we are in the last fiscal year, so.
Okay, Susan, with Tom Scanlon and the company, since now we have put him into a contract again, and we're looking at possibly another year, have you seen any type of changes or anything with the company?
No,
They're still right there when you need them?
oh yeah, no, Tom's firm they're local, they're out of South Deerfield. So they're pretty responsive to anything we need. If I need him to be on a bond rating call or something like that, he's there, so, I mean, there's a certain amount of work on the,
Sorry, but Maureen, we're trying to converse about Maureen,
Oh.
who had forgotten or didn't realize it was at 4 o'clock, and so she's trying to decide whether she should try and get here, but she won't be here till 4:45, so we're trying to figure out whether we should tell her to come at 4:45 or
I'm-
not. I apologize.
Oh, no
Mhm.
problem.
It's okay. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, what we were just discussing is that rather than have Maureen rush here from Holyoke, we could have our discussion, make our points, and then bring this up for a vote at the next council meeting during our finance committee there, so Maureen could actually be around to vote on it. If that makes sense, because this isn't, this is like the beginning of something that doesn't have to happen until September, so it's not like
Exactly.
not like we have a gun to our head to make up our mind. But the real discussion is, are we going to consider this to be the 4th year, or consider the fact that they've been here pretty much forever? And we did procurement 4 years ago. Do we want to do it at this point, or do another year and then do it at the end of a 5-year hitch and then off, and then do a 5-year contract, rather than change it every year? And what's your feeling about that, Councilor Ward?
I don't have a problem with Scanlon.
With keeping them for another year? And that,
I look at, not what I feel about it, I look at the professionals that are working with him all the time, and I feel really good about hearing from our financial director of exactly,
mhm.
are they still right there? Are they working with them all the time when they make their calls? That's important to me.
Yeah, though we do have to keep in mind that it's basically Susan and the mayor that we're auditing here. I mean, this is sort of our, in our role, Susan can only help us so much because it's us auditing them.
Right.
So everybody has a good working relationship, which is a good thing, but we can only take so much input from the administration, because this is our check on the administration is the auditor. So, but it's good to know that it's not an argumentative relationship, and that professionally they work well together.
Right, and I think that's valuable, hearing from the financial team of how they do associate with Scanlon. That's what it's all about, because we don't.
No, we really don't. We don't deal with the department heads, many of them, especially not always the finance ones. And remember, we're just making a recommendation to the council.
Exactly.
We could come back and say, listen, you know, procurement was 4 years ago, they recommend 5 to 8, next year will be 5 years, let's do it then. And the council could say, oh, no, we, you know, we want you to do the procurement now, and for whatever reason. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to remind them what that process was like, how many, I can't remember how many firms
Or
we brought.
four.
We brought in
Yeah.
4 firms.
Yeah.
There was a list of 12 that we sent RFPs to.
mhm.
And, you know, just remind them that process we went through, that was 4 years ago, the recommendation is 5 to 8.
Mhm.
And
I know.
I developed a timeline too, if you guys do decide to go forward, that's in your packet.
Why don't you give us that so that it's in, you
Yeah,
I have
know,
It's in the packet and it's basically intended.
for more or less for the camera, so if anybody watches this, they know what we're.
It's
we'd be up
intended
for.
to allow the city council to make its decision by September 15th, which is what the charter requires. And I did 2 alternate timelines, because one has you making, conducting the interviews and making a recommendation August 27th, but there would only be 1 council meeting at that point, September 5th, before so they wouldn't have 2 meetings to vote.
Right.
So the other timeline, actually, I backed it up so that you would be conducting interviews and making the recommendation July 22nd, so they would be able to consider your recommendation at their August meeting and have 2 meetings, the August meeting and the September. So, and the timeline, you know, you have to give people 30 days with Joe Cook's recommendations for responding to the proposal. So we would either issue the RFP either July 1st for response August 2nd under that August 27th scenario that only gives the council 1 meeting, or May 1st. And then in order for me to get started, what I was going to ask for you guys today was to, if you wanted to go forward, to approve the timeline and then also just approve the format that we were going to use for the RFP, which I was going to recommend the one that we used in 2015 because it was very thorough. And
That worked really,
Yeah.
that worked
Yeah,
well.
that was
I
perfect.
mean, the process was fine.
Mhm.
And I know that Pam had taken some model RFPs from other communities that she'd gotten from Susan Wright, and that she followed a checklist from the
Yeah.
American Institute of CPAs that said these are things that you should include in RFPs for auditing services, and those were all in there. So, so really, you know, it's an excellent, I've actually gone over the scope of services a little bit with Joyce Karpinski and looked at it a little bit with Susan Wright, and it seems to be right on that this is actually what we're looking for the auditing firm to do.
Yeah.
One thing we ran into the last time, Susan, because these people are all actively auditing communities now, we kind of ran into the fact that they were basically saying, you got to kind of not want us to do a lot until after a certain date, because we're all up to our ears in people's books you know, in this time frame. They're auditing, and because that's what they do.
Right.
So we want to have our process align up with them such that they have the time to actually respond when they're not trying to get somebody's audit done.
We need our audit complete by February so the audit for 2018 needs to be complete by February of 2019, because we have to file it with our annual disclosure, which is related to our debt service. And we also have to use it we have to have it available for the next bonding. So basically they need to be able to come in September and October to do that, because the auditors are assisting the city auditor with free cash certification, which we try to get done in November, December. They're assisting with schedule, like any corrections or anything they find get reported on Schedule A. So she has to file Schedule A. We have to set the tax rate. We have to get free cash certified. And then a couple of months down the road, we have to file an annual financial disclosure and have an audit. So they have to be able to commit to doing the work in September and October.
Okay. So
This contract is for September.
yeah, the question was,
15th,
so essentially, if we're wanting to talk to them in July, we're not putting a crimp in their busy season.
Yeah, right. They would need to know, like, to get us on the schedule, like, you're gonna do this September, you're gonna pick the auditor for 2020. So if you pick in September, that's plenty of time that they would know that
But I
they
mean,
needed to be on our schedule.
To have them devote time to making proposals
Oh,
and
got
visiting
it.
with
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah,
Our
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
I don't want to drop our process on them when they're up to their ears trying to
Got
audit
it,
the
I
community.
got it. No, this is a good time right now, if you were to do.
Right,
do-
but
do-
if we, if we take this to council, let's say we go to council and we say, renew for a year, and council says, no, we want you to go through the process again now.
Mhm.
So we send out our RFPs, meeting with them, and we're really busy doing the budget in
Right.
June. So if
Right.
we said, let's get through our budget, and then we want to see you with your proposals in July, that's when they're really busy auditing.
They're starting to, as soon as June 30th comes, they're hitting the ground. So they might be going to some smaller communities
Mhm.
whose books close out faster than ours.
Mhm.
I know that they do come in August, like they come and do some pre-work in August, so,
Yeah.
usually July would be a good time because all the towns are still,
Closing your books.
everybody's still closing their books in July.
So if we did it like somewhere between the 1st and the 15th, had them come in, they're still waiting for everybody to do their last adjustments
Right,
by the 15th,
right.
and so we would, and then we're done with our budget,
Mhm.
which keeps us really busy.
Right,
So we could be, as long as we send out our RFP, get their replies, pick the ones we want to talk to, and schedule them for the busiest vacation season of the year.
right.
But these timelines call for a contract, awarding the contract by September 15th. So that would be probably late, because then,
Well, no,
What's the next
that's
year?
the following year. So
It's the
you've
next
already
year.
hired Tom to do the 2019. So Tom will be here this summer.
got it.
Yeah.
So if you pick someone in September, that's like perfect in terms of
Got it.
them saying, okay, I know I have a really big, in the first year, if you do switch, it's gonna be a lot of more time on their part, but it's also gonna be a lot more time on staff's part. Because we spend probably 3 solid weeks with them, pretty much. The auditor's office is like completely 100% devoted to them for a 2 or 3 week period. If we have a new one come in, that will also add time to that process as well. So, not a reason not to change, just something to know that it will require, at least for a year or two, more substantial.
Yeah. And hence
Staff.
why the people coming in have to build in more hours,
Correct,
because they don't know the community yet.
right,
So,
Right.
that does give the incumbent an advantage price-wise,
Right.
because they know, where everything is, and they're up to date up to last year, unlike the rest of them, so.
right. You have to basically compare everything to last year, and,
And if you've already done last year, you got a real leg up on the competition.
Right. I mean, I do want to say, these are not audits to necessarily detect fraud. These are audits to make sure we're following generally accepted accounting principles, that we're following DOR's regulations, that we're doing that. Fraud is detected during these at times, and it's primarily because the auditor knows what happened prior. Like, one example of fraud was the auditors, not here, not in Northampton, in another community, they noticed that receipts were down, way down over the prior 2 years for that month. And that's how they ended up delving in and finding out that there was some funny business going on
Mhm.
there. So they have to know history in order to interpret the present. So-
To see change.
But they have the audit from the previous auditor too. It's not, it's
How
not
can it be
a mystery.
fraudulent, Susan? I don't understand that.
What?
Receipts, how can they be fraudulent? I mean, they're made out to a city.
Well, there's not enough.
There's a lot, there's so many ways, schemes that have been cooked up, and it's just, it's amazing. Especially, it happens in every level of towns. I think Rockland found out their Board of Health inspector was fraudulently issuing inspections, never doing inspections, but issuing those things. I mean, you've had, in Franklin County, you've had tax collectors basically pocketing the money and putting it on the books that it's paid, but then nothing balances.
Yeah, but how can that happen when it's made out to the city? I mean, if I got a check
Yeah,
and I'm paying a bill for the city of Northampton,
yeah,
how could that staff person
yeah.
cash that check, I don't get it.
Well, sometimes, you know, when you get something that says collector and it says Mary Smith collector and people make it out to Mary Smith.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, there's a million ways people can do.
Try to,
Yeah, I mean, I read about one school superintendent, he and his wife created a dummy corporation to sell school supplies. And then they bought a ton of school supplies that were never delivered from that, and he's now in jail. So, so people always get caught. It's just, you know, but there's been some pretty interesting schemes that we do hear about in, you know, the municipal world. So, but that isn't, you know, that isn't the primary purpose. The purpose of this audit isn't really to go find fraud, but when you notice that trends are off, that's the auditor's antenna goes up and says, I need to understand why that's off. And they come into my office and they may sit down with me and they say, you know, tell me why this revenue line was down this year, you know, and I have to explain. And, you know,
So
and
it's like
every auditor will do that. I don't want to make it sound like only Tom would do
Right,
this.
right.
You know,
But
this
it's
is what
like a
they
red
do.
flag, they're telling you.
They're
this.
looking for red flags, but they're also basically making sure that we have booked everything correctly, that we have, you know, that the treasurer and the collector and the auditor have been regularly reconciling, you know, so they're reviewing basically our whole work product for the year. So,
yeah, and there's always a lot of scrutiny, and they try and minimize anywhere the cash would be.
right,
Because I notice they're always very concerned about process at parking where they collect cash, you
right,
know, at rec where people pay fees in cash, you know, anywhere there's cash,
right.
they really are into the paperwork to follow the cash and the receipts to make sure it all
And
gets
they,
in.
and they make recommendations to us about how to, you know, how to tighten up practices. And I know Laura had asked me about in the RFP, it says, you know, that they will look at 4 to 6 departments. So at the beginning of the audit process, they will come to me and say, what departments do you want us to kind of take an extra look at this year? And I might say, you know, look at trash bag, look at the, you know, the solid waste fund, the trash bag, handling of the trash, the dollar for the trash bags, that kind of thing. Or I might say, you know, look at this particular account. But
And I suppose if you have a new employee somewhere,
food service,
yeah, somebody
Yes.
new you say, well, make sure they're doing it right.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you rotate through those departments? Do you kind of keep track of what you've audited most recently?
Right, right. And again, the more cash the department handles, the more chances there are for things to go the wrong way. If there's no cash, it's very hard to not, it's harder for anybody to do anything that's not correct.
Right, well, there wouldn't be a problem because they're not handling cash.
Right, right. Cash is, I mean, there are other ways to do this without cash, but cash
More-
is the single most point of
Vulnerable place.
vulnerability. You know, food service in the schools, you know, any place.
trash bags,
the trash bags
stickers.
is a lot, very cash heavy kind of thing. And, you know, we've made a lot of changes over the years, like, you know, we've gone to general billing, which is much better. So I'll use the example, what used to happen is Smith Folk used to send out tuition bills to all the 40-something towns. They'd send them out quarterly. They just send them out and then they would come in and they'd keep a spreadsheet. So now what we do is we actually commit them. So what Smith Folk does is first quarterly payment is $1,200,050. They commit that, it's in Munis, every bill that they send out has an account, and as those payments come in, they're booked against
Posted
it.
to Munis.
So it's just, we treat it almost like a tax bill, it's committed and this, so that cleans up a lot of stuff, because then no one can say, I never sent that town a bill, you know, it's in Munis, the bill was sent, the bill's, you know. So we have done a lot of work to bring some of the larger dollar amount kind of things into Munis, into general billing, and the auditor has been the one to work on that, so.
Because lots of people look at Munis. So it's very easy to tell if
Yes,
something's off, who didn't pay. Not just the person who's looking to process the payment, but people that are looking, like when you're looking to
right,
say, why is this account down? You can go look at it and say, oh, Chester hasn't paid us yet.
right, right. We have so many eyes on things in Northampton, you know, I think it's, in some towns, the staff is much smaller and insular, so there are more opportunities perhaps in some smaller organizations for people to get away with things. I think there's just so many eyes on our stuff that, yeah, which is good.
And then I'm assuming there's a limited number of firms, that would be interested in us only because of our size. We're gonna be too small for some, we're gonna be too big for others. I mean, you have I'm sure a number of these people that practice on communities our size, and so there's not an unlimited number of people who realistically want to do us.
I think we got the 4 most
Likely suspects.
common ones with our last RFP.
Yeah.
So the ones that we got, one of the firms does Amherst, one of them does a lot of other municipalities. So, I mean, there's not a ton of these firms, but there are those 4, and those are probably the 4 big ones.
The 4
That would be most interested.
that would be interested and would be reasonably capable of doing us,
Yeah,
should we want to go there.
yeah. I think we had Melanson and Heath, we had Tom Scanlon, we had, Powers and
Clifton
something.
Larson, something like that.
yeah, there was a 4th one, so.
Mhm.
I mean, the financial team is fine with whatever, the council wants to do. We'll accommodate whether it's a new auditor or the existing one. I will say that, we're all very happy with the work that Tom does. He's very helpful to us. That's not to say another vendor wouldn't do the same, but it is very convenient to pick up the phone and say, come to the bond rating call, come, I need this, or sometimes I'll just call and say, we got this weird amount of money. The money that was given for Puerto Rican students that came here from when the hurricane hit, and so the feds gave money, but it was after the fact, but the feds wanted it booked in 2018, but we got the money in 2019, so that's the kind of thing that we'll call ahead and say, we don't even know where to begin, how to book
How
this.
to process this. Yeah.
And so they'll work with us, so.
Mhm.
So, we do call them a fair amount throughout the year for some oddball things.
And reasonably speaking, if we're going to accept the fact that we should do somewhere in the 5 to 8 year range, if we change, we should imagine we're changing for a stretch. That we're going to.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to switch, so if you do switch, I would say try to do like a 5-year or something, just because it's a lot of work to jump back and forth. And I will say, there are guidelines that we have to go by. We have to follow rules. Massachusetts is highly regulated in terms of municipal finance, but there are areas where there is discretion, and one auditor might like something done this way, and another auditor may want it done a different way, and both can be right. But if we flip-flop back and forth, with any frequency, the consistency of our books will suffer because there won't be that. So if you do decide to switch, I would say switch for a good hefty period of time so that we don't get one auditor 1 year saying, I want you to book this way, and another auditor coming in a year later telling us to do it differently. And I will say, if you do switch, the first year I suspect the new auditor will want to find as many things and prove their worth, and so, our management letter may not look like our current ones, and again, it won't be because we're doing anything necessarily wrong, it'll just be one auditor likes this done this way and another one likes it done a different way, so.
Mhm. Now, if we were to change and we go with, let's say, the 5-year contract concept, we kind of know what to expect from Scanlon, but if we switch to a totally new company, would it make sense to do a 3-year contract with 2 built-in renewals at our discretion? So if we really don't like them,
Right.
we don't have to deal with them for 5 years?
Well, that might be a good idea.
And say, we're going to guarantee you 3 years, so it's worth your while to come over and see us.
Right,
But if it's Tom and we know we're getting, we could say, we'll give you the 5. If we switch to a new company, we could say, we're going to give you 3 with our option to renew twice.
right.
And that way, if we're tearing our hair out and nobody likes them,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to wait 5 years.
I was gonna recommend that we put something in the contract about contract renewal, because that's one thing, there's not really anything, there's not an
Right.
option to renew built into this.
Yeah.
It'd be good to
Or
actually
we could
have
do it the
that.
other, we could also do it with the 5 to 8 and say, we'll give you 5 and renew up to 8 if we're happy with what we're getting.
Right. I mean, Amherst has used Melanson and Heath for, I think, 25 years. They've not switched.
That's what
We've been with Tom,
mentioned.
Yeah,
I would hazard to guess at least 20 years. So, I mean, I've been here almost 15, and Tom has been here, and I think he was here well before me.
So does anyone follow the state's recommendation?
Most of my counterparts
Uh-huh.
keep with the same firm.
Mhm. Yeah, but you can still follow the state's recommendation and just renew every 5.
Yeah.
You know, do only a 5-year contract. Now, if you keep renewing a 5-year contract, you keep renewing it, but at least you review it
Right.
and check with everybody and see if everybody's happy and.
I know some auditors, like, Town of Long Meadow had Tom for years, and they actually, their finance committee wanted to do this, and they switched. And the company that came in offers them like another level of audit, which costs more. But from the feedback I got from the finance director there, that it was just a lot more work, but not much more value. And I forget what they called it. It's like I'd have to find out the name of it, but it's nice. It's like they do a whole nother thing where they do a comparison and stuff. They give you a different kind of report, but that finance director was like, said it, he didn't find a lot of value in it.
Mhm.
But I can find out what that was, because I know that some of the audits that we were offered before may have suggested that. It's called comprehensive something or other, but.
in the town of Greenfield just switched from Mellons and Heath. I guess the city council decided to get Bloom Shapiro, so I'd love
Oh, okay.
to see, because they haven't been through a whole audit yet. This
Right.
just happened in the fall. I'd love to get feedback from them about
Mhm.
how that switch has
Yeah.
gone.
And I could see, you may want to, you know, if we were to have a change of administration, maybe we would want to switch auditors at a time like that or something. You know, that would to me, lead me to think, you know, now might be the time to change, since there's a changing of the guard and,
I'm out of here June 30, 2021.
then you won't care anymore.
And the auditor probably will follow soon after, so.
Yeah.
That's his thinking, I don't think that way.
Mhm.
2021 is my timeline, so. So, I know, as I sit and work on the budget, I'm like, 20.
One more.
2 more after this.
I mean, we've had Tom with Mary Ford, we've had Tom with Claire Higgins.
Okay, so if he was here when Mary Ford was here, then
Uh-huh.
it's probably even more than 20 years.
Oh, yeah. And then.
Well, it was his
Dave-
dad back then.
Yes, yes.
It was his dad.
yes,
What?
yes.
Remember his dad? No, this Tom, it was his father back then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was, but the same company, but he wasn't running and his father was running it.
Yep.
I've worked for 7 towns and I've had Tom in every. Yes,
South Hadley had Tom and.
yes. And at first it was his father.
Was his father. So, I mean, so clearly, lots of municipal entities around here trust their work, DOR trusts their work. I mean, I'm assuming if they weren't getting the job done for all these towns, DOR would have stepped on them a long time ago. Put them on a blacklist or something and said, yeah, they're not acceptable.
I have to say, as I said, Massachusetts municipal finance is so regulated. We are so much more regulated than other states.
Oh, I
Like,
believe
you know,
it.
our laws are just so tight. You can only appropriate certain things at certain times. I mean, DOR keeps such an eye on us, which is good, because I think that's why Massachusetts is such a fiscally solvent state, because the underlying fabric, which is all the communities, have to adhere to a very high level of standards.
Well, and the state is kind of obligated to bail out a municipal corporation if it goes south for one reason or another, so they want to do everything they can to make sure we don't.
Right.
So they don't have to spend any more money on us, you know, because if an incorporated city or town blows up,
Yeah.
the state has to basically fix it. So they'd rather see that coming
Right,
and keep everybody on the straight and narrow so they don't have to do that. 'Cause
right.
they,
Right, I mean, when you think, we have the basic financial statements, which is that, then they do the, they call it the single audit, which is all of the federal money. They go in and audit all of our federal money. And then the schools get a separate audit, which they have to submit to DESI, which is on top of the audit that they're part of, which is basically looking where every dollar in the schools went. So they have that going on as well. So there's
like three.
multiple levels of audit going on, so, I mean, I'm just glad I work in Massachusetts, because I always feel like there's so many people watching us that we're doing it right, that
Mhm.
it gives you more comfort.
Yeah, you're not gonna end up making license plates during your retirement.
Correct, yeah.
Because everybody's
Right.
staying on top of
With
everything.
DOR, I mean, do you hear from them quite a bit, or what? Do they ever come here? No.
No.
They visit the assessors a lot.
But, you know, everything,
That's what I-
everything
that's
you, for
right.
the tax rate has to get approved. Joan has multiple levels of approval before we're allowed to set the
Yeah.
tax rate. When we set the tax rate, what we are doing when we submit the recap sheet is we're proving to Boston that we have a balanced budget, that, because I have to submit every vote you've taken and show where that money came from. So they are checking to make sure, do you have a balanced budget? So it's a, you know, they are pretty thorough. And it takes a while to get these things approved through them.
And the assessor's office in a city has an assigned rep from what, Bureau of Local Assistance or something?
Yeah, Bureau of Assessment has so Joan has an assigned rep, Joyce, the auditor, has an assigned, and I have an assigned rep
Okay.
who's handling the other side
Yeah.
of things.
So they're watching throughout the process what's going on. And this is a recertification year for Joan, I think.
Yes.
So
yes.
she'll get extra scrutiny this year.
Right, because the Municipal Modernization Act changed the reval from 3 years to 5 years. But the way they scheduled ours is we actually have to have ours a little sooner, and then we'll be good for 5 more years, so.
But
Counselor, did you work in Joan's office?
I was an assessor for I was one of the
That's what I
assessors
thought.
for many years.
Somebody told me that.
Yeah, for many years. In fact, I happily maintain my MAA
Okay.
to today. I'm certified and I keep up that certification. Just never know when I'll leave the dark side and go back to being an honest assessor again.
Yeah.
And just to Susan's point, that the financial statements and the accounting process, it's very well prescribed in Massachusetts. The last page I handed out in your packet there was a list of what the basic financial statements are for the city of Northampton. And you see there's the government-wide, the statement of net position, which is your assets and liabilities, and the statement of activities, which is your revenue and expenses. Well, and then you have a bunch of individual fund statements. When I went on the Town of Amherst website, the list of basic financial statements is basically the same.
Right.
They may be titled slightly different, but what the auditor is doing is they're opining on your financial statements. They're saying whether or not these are a fair and accurate representation of the
Yeah.
city's real financial statement.
Mhm.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's not a lot of room for creativity in the work of the auditors.
Right, 'cause they all follow
Their job
GASB.
is to
Right.
opine on these basic financial statements, which are basically the same for every municipality.
Have you heard
So
anything about GASB changes? Is there any grumbling about that or?
You know, the auditor pays more attention to
To that?
that than I do, so.
Because I know the last like mega change was unfunded liabilities for pensions.
OPEB,
yeah.
first it was retirement board, and now it's OPEB. We have to recognize that on our financial statements, so, you know, on paper, it makes us.
Looks pretty scary.
It's very scary, but we're in the same boat as everybody else, so. And we're actually, I think, in a
A
nicer
better,
boat.
a nicer bad position than
Yeah.
most people.
Yes, yes, because we have started an OPEB fund, and, you know, So-
We're addressing the issue.
yeah.
So what's everybody's pleasure? Do you want to propose? I mean,
I would say that I don't see a reason to recommend something fewer years than what is recommended by the state, right? So if we, I would recommend extending it another year, and then we'll be at that minimum of the
Mhm.
state's recommendation. And then it could be a discussion again, or then there's still even, for 3 more years of their recommendation. But it doesn't seem to make any sense to do it for less than the recommendation,
No.
when we just went through this process 4 years ago.
Yeah, does that work for you, Counselor? You think that's okay?
Yeah, I'll go the 1 year, the 3 years.
Oh, no, we probably should I would support doing the one,
Yeah.
and then take that to the council and see what they say, how they feel about, because essentially 5 to 8's in the window.
Right.
See how happy they want to make Susan and maybe do one more year and she's out of here without changing auditors and having to reinvent the process.
Plus, I think that 1 year is good because hearing from Susan about how busy they are, even out through the months of June and July, whatever, they're still very busy because of the budget.
Mhm.
So I think it does make sense to go for a year. But either which way, I think they're very reputable. I think they've done a good job here in the city, and I don't hear any complaints ever from the financial department.
Mhm.
And again, the financial team will work with whomever you have, because we see them all as resources. They help
Mhm.
us make sure that we do things correctly. So
Mhm.
we're on board with whoever you choose.
Mhm.
Do we like
have no choice.
Scanlon? Absolutely. I'm sure we'll like someone else too, so.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, I mean, it's no reflection on the quality of their work.
Correct.
It's whether someone would just take a slightly different view, or would notice something that they don't
Right.
notice, or just, that's
Yeah.
the value of it. It's not
Yes.
in any way just having the conversation is no way impugns
Correct.
how
Mhm.
excellent their work is.
Right,
It's just.
right.
when
No,
you're in-
we'll work with whomever the council, decides to hire.
Yeah, just, you don't know when it's switching every year.
Just
No.
don't switch every year, because that would just send us into a crazy town situation, because like,
So do you want to make a motion we do that?
Sure. Was there something you were gonna say, Laura?
Well, I was just gonna say, we probably need to get a recommendation to the city
For our
council
next
sooner
meeting.
rather than later, because if they did decide, no, the full council would like to do the RFP this year, we'd have to issue the RFP by
Right.
May 1st,
Mhm.
or,
Yeah.
between
Well,
May and July, so that, just to give time to do the full process.
Yeah.
So,
I'm comfortable with it too, because we all seem to be on the same page. So I mean, if we were split on this, I'd say let's wait for Maureen and bring it up at the council meeting, but since we're all comfortable with the year extension, would you?
Yeah, I moved to extend the contract. by
Good for a
1 year.
second? All right, any more discussion? All in favor?
I
Aye. Aye. All right, and I don't think there was anything else. Well, we talk about the RFP format if we were recommending it, so.
should I put a report from committee, that's how they had it in 2015,
Yeah.
on the agenda for
Mhm.
the,
Yeah.
full council?
Yep. That would be, it'd be in our minutes, but we can put it in there for committee. If you want to put it in committee for reports from committee chairs or something, then I'll put it in there and I'll just say, hey, we met and our recommendation is to extend for another year. And then that'll be our report. And it'll be in there and it's also going to be in our minutes.
have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
How did you fare last night with the wind? Did you have the wind we did?
Oh my God, it was awful. We lost a huge tree in our yard, but it didn't land on, it landed in a field, so it's just messy.
So it's firewood for next year.
It's, yeah, branches everywhere though,
Yeah.
all
Awful.
across the yard. It's amazing.
Mhm.
We had one house on West Stanton Road, and I was at the VFW awards night that they had there,
Yeah,
and a couple of residents came up and said, Counselor, a house just got hit really bad on West Stanton Road. Thank
Wow.
God the mayor was there last night. I said, Mayor, help me out.
yeah.
I said, can you look it up and see what house it is?
Mm-hmm.
And it's further up from Len,
Oh, okay,
okay? I mean, that
yeah.
whole big pine tree, right over that roof, right in there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, then another one on Ryan Road also.
Oh, wow. Well, I know the mayor lost his
Mayor
part
lost
of his
his
shed last night too, so.
Shed the good
I know. Oh, well, good thing we got a good tree crew, because I think.
They were out on Woodlawn Avenue last night.
Yeah, yeah. so-
I'm hoping the tree that fell down fell and squished somebody's hedge, and I couldn't tell if their car was behind the hedge. It usually is, so.
Okay, well, glad no one was hurt. That's
I
the
know.
main thing, so.
God.
All right, see you all later.
Bye,
Bye.
Jason.
So do we have a motion to adjourn? Because I think we're done.
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.